single place where the Bible seems to contradict and come up with some sort of answer, like give them some sort of apologetic argument of, well, this is how it actually is. But it does mean that we need to be thinking about these, and we need to be ready when somebody comes and asks us, what about this? We need to know what to say to them. Even if we don't know the answer, we need to have an answer. We need to always be ready to give an answer. I mean, because here's the thing. God doesn't need us to defend his word. Okay? His word is still going to be there when we're long gone. When the critics are long gone. When they die and get to heaven, they'll know better. Right? God's word will still be standing. He doesn't need us to defend it. But he does tell us to be ready with an answer. To be ready to talk intelligently about these things with people. Not to stutter and say, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe the Bible does contain errors. No. And that's why we need to be thinking about these. And frankly, part of dealing with contradictions in the Bible is understanding biblical genre. Understanding the context of the passage. Okay? Most of the time, when somebody brings up a contradiction, they're taking the Bible out of context. They're reading it in the wrong genre style. Okay? I mean, take Tarshish, for example. Is Tarshish in the east or Tarshish in the west? Who cares? Okay? The point is not geography. The book of Jonah is not trying to teach us about geography. The book of Jonah is trying to teach us about God. This is theological telegraphing. This is the point of Tarshish, is that it's at the uttermost parts of the earth. This is the farthest location known to them in their time period that Jonah could possibly have gone to. Right? That's the point. So I just thought I'd clarify some of those. I don't think I was as clear as I could have been last week when we discussed that. But now let's get into lesson 4, finishing up chapter 1 of Jonah. Jonah and the pagan sailors. So when we left off in our study the last time, reading through the lens of the ancient Israelite, we're caught off guard by a strange decision of Jonah's. Jonah fled from before the face of the Lord. And now we're going to see some of the consequences, ramifications of those choices. So let's start in Jonah chapter 1 and verse 4, where it says, "But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner parts of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, 'What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish.' And they said to one another," this is the sailors, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And they said to him, "Tell us, on whose account this evil has come upon us? What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you?" And he said to them, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So the first thing we notice here is the great tempest. And here are two of our key words. The Lord hurled a great wind. We see this word hurled occurring over and over again in the passage, and also great. The word great in the Hebrew, gadol, I believe, is a word that appears over and over and over in this book of Jonah. A word that captures our attention. So this idea of hurling down, what's this trying to telegraph? You see, the Lord hurled a great wind. You see the sailors hurled the cargo. You see, Jonah tells them, hurl me over the overboard. Right? Anybody have any thoughts on why use this word? Why use this imagery? What sort of idea is the writer trying to bring to mind?
Violence, high energy, fear.
Okay.
Wake us up.
Maybe. These are good thoughts. Somebody mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago, look at the direction Jonah's going. Keeps going downhill, right? And this word hurled could be translated cast down. Does anybody have a translation that renders it that way? Cast down or something along those lines? Throw me into the sea. To throw. It's the idea of something starting up here and getting thrown down or cast down. It kind of parallels the direction that Jonah's going, right? Yeah, Gary?
To me, it seems to be something that's done very deliberately.
Yeah, yep.
Specifically, hurling.
Mm-hmm. Very deliberate action. But notice God's sovereignty through the storm. Who hurled the storm? Who hurled the great wind? The Lord did. And this is something that we're going to keep picking up on as we go throughout the book. God is behind these actions. God is behind these natural forces. It's Him doing this in order to steer Jonah in a particular direction. Jonah wants to go down, down, down. Okay, he goes down to Joppa. He goes down into the ship. Eventually, he goes down into the sea. Jonah's on this downward spiral. And the Lord keeps using His sovereign will over creation to try to break Jonah's stubborn will and bring him on the path up to Nineveh. I think the geography is very interesting in here that the Lord tells Jonah to go up to Nineveh. Nineveh is north of Israel, and Jonah goes down to Joppa and continues to go down from there. I could be putting these things on the slide if I remembered. What about Jonah's condition? What do we see here about Jonah's condition? Obviously, he was fast asleep. But is our writer, do you think our author here is just trying to state a fact that, hey, once Jonah got into the ship, boy, he was really tired, so he went down in the ship and took himself a nap? Is that what the author's trying to telegraph here? Or is there something more? Yep. That's true. We see this consistently about Jonah, that he doesn't seem to care much about other people, specifically Gentiles. But maybe let's shift our focus off of the physical, the corporeal, and let's maybe think spiritually. Jerry?
I don't know if this is thinking spiritually, but life application says Jonah's disobedience to God endangered the lives of the ship's crew. We have great responsibility to obey God's word because our sin and disobedience can hurt others around us.
Yes. Yep. And we looked a little bit last week on how it cost Jonah more to flee than it did to go. And here we're starting to see some of those ramifications, some of that cost. Any other thoughts, Marty?
When you say that, the thought I have is if I willingly choose to disobey God, it doesn't make me want to sleep or have rest. It kind of typically keeps me awake because I know the decision I made was against God. Where in Jonah's case, he didn't seem to have that. He was able to rest, though he knew he disobeyed God.
Seems to have peace about his decision.
Yeah, that kind of always stuck out, that he had enough peace that he could still rest.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Jonah gets a good night's sleep. Dave, did you have?
I think he went down in the ship because he was trying to hide from God.
Very much so. You see this pattern of Jonah trying to get away from God, and the more he tries to get away, the further down he goes. This directional language. Gary?
Well, when you mentioned from the spiritual aspect, where was Jonah really at in his relationship with God?
Is Jonah sleeping spiritually? And is our author trying to telegraph that by making Jonah physically asleep? I think there's more going on here than Jonah's just taking a nap. Those are very good comments. Thank you. Yeah. Well, one other note here is on the storm itself. If these sailors were Phoenicians, which likely they were if they're in the Mediterranean Sea, then the storm must have been terrible indeed. This is from Faith Life Study Bible Notes. Because the Phoenicians are legendary for their seamanship, navigation skills. Phoenicians are known for being at sea and dealing with the waters. And also, now here's something you probably don't know, but for the ancient Near East, people that lived back in Jonah's time, here's how they thought about creation. It's different than what we think, because we look at things through the eyes of a 21st century Christian. But in their minds, the gods, okay, talking pagans, they believed these gods had created order, the world as we know it, by defeating the powers of chaos. Okay, so in their minds, there was this cosmic battle, if you will, between the powers of chaos and the powers of order, in which the gods tamed the powers of chaos and therefore created the orderly world as we know it. The powers of chaos weren't abolished necessarily, and so remained a constant threat. That explained why there's still sickness and bad things that happen. And for the ancients, the embodiment of these lawless and chaotic forces was the sea. Okay? Because you get out on the sea, if you get lost, there's no hope for you, okay? The sea is untamable. You can't survive underwater. The sea represents death and chaos for them. In Greek mythology, Poseidon, or Neptune, the god of the sea, was also the god of the earthquake, another chaotic power. And we'll see in the Bible a polemic where frequently God's control of the sea is used to stress his complete lordship over creation. So we have the Israelites who know the true God, and in their writings, they put in these little treasures of hey, our God is in control of the sea. And that telegraphs to these other nations, our God is in control of everything. He's the real God who tamed the powers of chaos. It's a different way of thinking about things, but this is what would have been going on in the minds of these sailors. These powers of chaos are coming down to crash over us. We're going to call out to our gods, and maybe they'll save us from these powers of chaos. Keep that theme in mind for next week. We're going to touch on it more. But let's look at some, what I call literary gems. The captain's message. The captain says to Jonah in verse 6, "What do you mean, O you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may perish." May not perish, yes. Thank you. Now, what does that remind you of anything that happened earlier in the story? Do you see some repeated language in what the captain says compared to what somebody else says? Jerry?
Well, they all cried out to their God.
Yeah,
Small g. Captain mentioned Yahweh.
he did. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Linda?
He said arise, and that's when God told
Oh.
Jonah.
So, is God sovereignly working through the captain to keep relaying his message to Jonah? Arise. What's the direction Jonah's going? Down. He keeps going down. What does God say? Arise. What does he say through the captain? Arise. Now the captain, he's concerned about the ship and his sailors. Tells him, call on your God. But he's still giving this command, arise. Do you think when Jonah heard that, he's like, oh, I've heard that before?
I think there's another parallel. It says in verse 6 that we may not perish. And God's message to Jonah was, further evil has come up before me. There's kind of a parallel there.
Isn't that interesting? Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish. What about verse 9 of chapter 3, where the king of Nineveh says, who knows? God may turn and relent and turn from his fierce anger so that we may not perish. Interesting. The foreshadow of Nineveh. We see wordplay in the words of the sailors here. They say, where do I have this? Sailors say, come, let us cast in lots, that we may know whose account this evil has come upon us. The sailor's statement, this is from Robert Chisholm's commentary, Interpreting the Minor Prophets, says that the sailor's statement to come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity is filled with irony. The Hebrew word translated calamity, I don't know what version he's using, in the ESV translates it evil. The Hebrew word translated calamity, which is the Hebrew word ra'ah, appears in verse 2, where God tells Jonah to arise, go to Nineveh, call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. We've looked at this before. And there it's rendered, in his version, wickedness. Now, this is the same Hebrew word, but is it being used to convey the same meaning? What is the evil that God talks about in reference to the Ninevites? Is that a natural disaster of this world, or is this a conscious wickedness? I would say the latter, right?
When we took the FBI class, there was something in there about they were really wicked. They tortured people, skinned them alive.
Yeah. Yes, this is a conscious choice of theirs to be evil and wicked. That's the way ra'ah is being used there. But for the sailors, cast lots that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. What's the evil that's come upon them? The storm that God sent. Is this the same kind of evil? No. There's a subtle shift in the meaning of the term to tie this again back to what God says to Jonah. This is all tying back to what God said. Jonah keeps hearing this. Jonah keeps getting reminded, I'm out of line with God. I'm in disobedience. So they say here, Jonah has been sent to denounce ra'ah, or evil, in the moral sense, in the pagan world. And instead, he's become the source of evil in the non-moral sense among the pagans. Isn't that ironic? Jonah's statement is also dripping with irony. For the God who made the sea and the dry land, he says he serves the God who made the sea and the dry land, is the God that he's running away from via the sea. Okay? I think Jonah's having a bit of a wake-up call here. So let's look at Jonah in relation to the sailors. By casting Jonah into the sea, this is a quote from Moshe Peli on the literary art of Jonah. It says, the sailors enact or concretize the divine concern for society in contrast to the interests of the individual. Okay? Jonah as a whole, he's a lot more focused on what he wants than being concerned over this large group of people, the Ninevites. I mean, God challenges with him he challenges him with that later in the book, where he says, should not I have mercy on this city in whom are this great multitude of people? But we see Jonah more focused on his individualism. And we see another irony, the sailors are more focused on saving the group as a whole. Okay? They're willing to sacrifice the one individual who's done this evil so that they wouldn't perish, so that the group as a whole wouldn't perish. Was Jonah that willing? Can somebody give me a definition of individualism?
When you feel that everything in the world is focused on you and you're focused on yourself and not treating the world.
The needs of the individual are more important than the needs of the whole. Do we live in an individualistic society? Do we live in a culture where the needs of the individual are more important than the needs of the whole? We saw that in Pastor's series on gender identity. These people, their focus is on themselves. Even in his message today, it's this prideful focus on self. Even in church. We come to church to get something for me. We come to church because I need something. I need something fulfilled. I need to learn something. I need to self-betterment, right? That's a good thing. But do we forget that a huge, huge part of being a Christian is ministering to others? Not being focused on my needs, but on their needs. Being focused on God. Because let me tell you this. If you come to a worship service and you are focused entirely on serving others, serving your brothers and sisters in Christ, and serving God, you will be blessed. You, the individual, you will be blessed and encouraged and uplifted and strengthened in your faith. But if it's your sole focus to just come and, I want to learn something, well, okay, that's good. You want to be better, but let's try turning our focus outward. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but the way that I read this was that even when Jonah says, hey, you're throwing me in the sea and it'll spare you, I don't think he's doing it to spare the sailors. It's the ultimate fulfillment of, I don't have to do what God says because I'm dead now. So even in that act, he's still, at least the way I read it, is he's still thinking about himself. It's all about him. He doesn't care about the sailors.
Yes. Now, the Expositor's Bible Commentary would slightly disagree with you, but I like your point. They say Jonah's answers to the distraught sailors was, in essence, hand me over to my God. And they say it's easy to overlook Jonah's spiritual greatness. Once the lot had pointed to him, he accepted that the storm was not simply a natural phenomenon. So on the one hand, Jonah was willing to be handed over to his God. And on the other hand, he knew that the God that he served would not make the sailors pay for what had been an innocent act on their part. So they kind of spiritualized Jonah a little bit. I'm more inclined to agree with you, though, that Jonah's not really doing this because he cares about the sailors, right? He's still thinking about himself. And he's thinking, if I'm dead, this is the ultimate escape, right? This is the ultimate bottom that I can go. And we're going to find, as we move into talking about the fish and move into Jonah's prayer, that Jonah has a wake-up call once he's literally faced with death. Okay? Jonah wakes up and realizes, this isn't what I wanted. But thanks for bringing that out. Now, concerning the lots, just a little bit of information on those. These were, the word here in Hebrew is gorah lot, and these were little stones, okay? And you can think of either like rolling dice or flipping a coin. It's something, well, the high priest, back in the Levitical law, the high priest had these two little stones that he would place in his breastplate called the Urim and Thummim. Okay? And the priest used these items to get answers from God, right? He'd ask God, hey, do we go up in battle against these people? And we don't know exactly how they used these Urim and Thummim, but these little stones, or whatever they were, gave the priest an affirmative or a negative answer. Yes, go up, or no, do not go up. And most of the time, it's just a yes-no situation. So you might think flipping a coin, right? And in their mind, God sovereignly directs that to give them the answer. But we also get instances in the Scripture where God seems to give them a more elaborate answer, not just a yes-no. So others have speculated, well, maybe these were like dice and they had different Hebrew letters on each side or something like that. In reality, we don't know. We can't be for certain what these things were. But it's a chance item, okay? It's a small item that you're going to throw or cast down like they do here. And it's going to give them an answer. We see that the sailors, okay, this is a culture in which divine beings, gods, are respected, right? Okay, I like to say that in the ancient days they were wiser than us because at least they believed in gods. Nowadays you have a bunch of atheists going around saying there's no God, when the evidence is clearly to the contrary. At least these ancient people knew that there was such a thing as divine beings. Okay? And when the sailors hear that Jonah serves the God of the sea and the dry land, they're like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? The logic was clear in their minds. Jonah disobeyed Yahweh, and because of his disobedience, this great storm was upon them. Therefore, Yahweh, God of Israel, was a truly great God. We already looked at Jonah's response to the sailors. But then the sailors respond to Jonah. Here's something interesting. Going back to our discussion on the sea as the powers of chaos, right? In their mind, the sea, what they're sailing on, is kind of the leftover remnants of the powers of chaos. And so throwing Jonah overboard is equivalent to murdering him, right? He's not going to survive. And that's why you see them pleading with God. Fear him greatly, or accept the name of Yahweh. Yahweh, save the souls of these pagan sailors. To teach them about himself. Yep, Jerry.
Do you ever wonder if the sailors ever found out that Jonah survived?
That's a curious thought. I've wondered that. It's conceivable. I mean, what do you think? These were Phoenician sailors who traveled the Mediterranean. Okay, if they know the way to Tarshish, they've been there before, right? So we can assume that they've been there and back. Is it conceivable that Jonah may have run into these people again in Joppa?
Either that, or if you think about it, the whole city of Nineveh repents, and Jonah had told them what his mission was. You would imagine, like, oh, hey, an entire city just repented. Actually, that was probably Jonah.
That's a good point. Maybe they heard the news. Hey, Nineveh repented. They're like, that's what that Jonah character is going to do. Maybe they would have looked into it. These lots, whatever these were. He worked through them, and they pointed to Jonah. God's sovereign. He's prepared to bring them back up. And I don't think we always recognize this in our own lives very well. Who's sovereign over the cast? Who's dictating those things? We disassociate. Okay. In the ancient mind, okay, remember we're going back to looking through the lens. There wasn't this big separation between the spiritual world and the physical world, okay? Things that happened was doing even. They had this mentality, this mind, why a dice will land on this. Disassociate. What goes on in the physical world with what goes on in the spiritual world, with what God is doing.
16 sailors, they were awestruck by the Lord's great power.
Yes.
They saw the storm stop just the way Jonah said it.
Mm-hmm.
They threw him in.
I love the word ceased. The sea ceased from its raging. To me, that says it's done, right? Just like the disciples. When Jesus calmed the storm ceased, and they were awestruck. Same thing with these sailors. And I want to encourage you to be careful not to be spiritual sleepers like Jonah. And we hit this a lot harder last week. But the choices we make affect us, and they condition us in certain ways, right? They condition us to either go down or go up. We got to
Put that thing kind of goes, to pride and kind of not having the right view of self. Sometimes when we get out of, and when Jonah answered, when they asked him that question, and he said, I am a Hebrew, which is true.
Yep.
But when he said, I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, I think he had an improper view of himself and his current relationship with God. I think he knew he was supposed to fear God, but he wasn't living like he was supposed to.
Right.
So I think he said what he should have said, but that's not what he was living.
Right. A hypocrite. Yeah, Dick.
Well, if you go seas, they don't cease. Even 50 miles away, it's a calm day, and the sea is just rolling as hard as it can because the wave can come from a long ways away. So they just don't stop. Just keep going.
You were in the military, right? No. Has anybody traveled or been on a seagoing vessel? No? Okay. But that's very true. Waters don't just stop. Okay? Or, no. Good point. Biblical narrative, and this is what I've been getting at in the last 3 lessons, talking about biblical literature. Biblical narrative is loaded with theological messaging. He's not just writing down a factual account of their seafaring journey. If you want a historical Paul we're in, okay, that's a little bit more. Here's the facts. Okay, this is a narrative. He's telling a story, and it's full of theological messaging. He's trying to teach the reader about his God. Show him that God can work sovereignly through these things. Even. Okay? And that's what's going on. So next week, we're going to discuss the fish. Okay? Lesson dedicated to one fish. It's going to be really interesting, I think, and it's going to be a really homework assignment because it's really just one verse. Nothing. But if you feel led to do some research on the fish and what this might have been, feel free. I won't discourage it. But we might come to some different conclusions next week with that teaser out there. Dave Soldan, would you be willing to close us in prayer?